and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. Good luck and Godspeed.
Have you ever had a premonition, a feeling that something dreadful is about to happen?
No, Mother, I have not been drinking.
Do you happen to have a pair of birds that are just friendly?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I have to go back into the past once more, just once more.
This is HitchPod, a podcast counting down the 20 best movies of the wonderful 20th century director Alfred Hitchcock. I'm Kat Jones. With me is Dan Libke, and in this episode we're comparing the 14th best Hitchcock movie, To Catch a Thief, and we're comparing that with a movie the Oscars thought was the best one from that year, and that movie was called Marty.
Yes, Marty. But before we get to Marty, we do like to give a clue at the beginning of these episodes as to what the next one will be, and because we're a bit tricky, we like to do a cryptic crossword style clue.
Yep.
So this is a clue for the 13th best Hitchcock film. And so see if you can work this out in just in the back of your mind as you listen to this. So the clue for this one: is it wrong to care about a shorter version of this film? 7 letters, question mark. Is it wrong to care about a shorter version of this film?
And of course the conventional clue is just 7 letters, because I think there's not too many Hitchcock movies
Yes.
with 7 letters, but you still might want to ponder it.
There's a few. I can think of at least a couple. But
At
anyway.
least 2.
So let's get into Marty. So Marty, much like To Catch a Thief, came out in 1955. It has an IMDb rating of 7.7 out of 10 and a very good Rotten Tomatoes score of 96%. Although we do like to look for other opinions.
Yeah.
And the only one I couldn't find any at the time, but I found Pauline Kael from 30 Years Later. She's quite a famous movie reviewer. So this is in the mid-80s. She says, "You have to have considerable tolerance to make it through Chayefsky's repetitive dialogue, his insistence on the humanity of, quote, little people, and his attempt to create poetry out of humble, drab conversations." So she was not a fan.
I love it.
Yes.
Fantastic.
But despite that, it was nominated for 8 Oscars, including wins for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. So they're 4 big victories for Marty.
Wow.
You can stream it for free on Amazon Prime in the US. You can't get it for free
Streaming-wise
in Australia or the UK. I didn't check every country, but I checked our biggest listener bases in Australia and the UK. But you can rent it from the usual sources there. It stars Ernest Borgnine. He plays Marty. And that's probably his most famous role and movie. Before this one, I think he was usually like a henchman kind of thug, but this kind of let him show his softer side. He was also later in The Poseidon Adventure.
Now that's his most famous role.
Probably, yeah.
So The Poseidon Adventure was a massive
It was very
hit.
big, yeah.
Massive hit. And I reckon I might have watched it 10 times when I was a child because my dad was a fan. That's where I know him from.
Yep.
And he looks almost exactly the same in
Yeah.
1972. I don't know how.
20 years older, yeah.
Is that because he looks 20 years older than he
I
is
think
in
so,
1955?
yeah. I think that's very possible.
He plays almost the same character
Yeah.
in The Poseidon Adventure. And boy, I wish we'd watched The Poseidon Adventure instead of Marty. But anyway.
Yes. Anyway, he also had a couple of recurring TV roles. He was in the TV show Airwolf, which was about some hyper-technological helicopter in the mid-80s, and he was in SpongeBob SquarePants. Other characters or other actors in the movie, Betsy Blair, she played Clara.
Now, she was married to Gene Kelly, right?
She was married to Gene Kelly.
Okay,
We'll have a
interesting.
little bit more to say about that
Yeah.
a bit later. Esther Minciotti, that played Marty's mother, and we did see her previously. She was in The Wrong Man.
I can't remember which one she was.
Yeah, but she was the mother in The Wrong Man. She was the one saying, was it Manny? Was it Manny?
Manny, oh
yeah, it was
yes,
Manny's mother.
okay.
So yeah,
So she was typecast.
yes, she
but-
was. She was a
yeah,
mother of
yeah.
disappointing sons.
She was excellent in
She
this
was good,
movie.
yes.
She was really good.
Yeah. Anyway, the synopsis of Marty is a middle-aged butcher and a school teacher who have given up on the idea of love. They meet at a dance and fall for each other. And it was written, as we alluded to, by Paddy Chayefsky, who won multiple Oscars for his writing. So he was a big deal in the Hollywood community.
Right.
He won another Oscar in 1976 for Network, and he won one in 1972 for The Hospital. So he's quite an accumulator of Academy Awards. And it was directed by Delbert Mann, and this was his feature film directorial debut. So something for Hitchcock to be annoyed about, that he was knocked off first time by this drama/romance. And you want to know the tagline for this one?
Go on.
The other guys wanted dames. He wanted a girl.
That is terrible.
It is indeed, yes. Anyway, shall we get into the plot of Marty?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so we do start with Marty. Marty's a butcher and he's talking to his customers, chopping up meat for them. And we learn that all of Marty's siblings are married. He's talking about all their weddings and the like. Marty is not, however, and his customers seem to take great offence to the fact that Marty's still single. They're basically just saying, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, Marty, which seems a little bit over the top.
It was totally over the top.
Yes, nevertheless, Marty kind of takes it all in his stride, heads off to hang out with his friends after work, and they're saying, oh, let's go out and pick up some girls, and Marty's like, oh, I can't be bothered doing that. And around about this point, because we didn't know anything about this movie going in other than it was an Oscar winner, and I think at this point we both speculated, oh, maybe Marty's gay, maybe that's kind of the worthy aspect of this film, that Marty, that's going to explore, you know, this hidden homosexuality in the 1950s.
Which I think was against the code at the time.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But they could have alluded to it, or it could have been really subtle.
That would have been a movie.
Might have been a movie, but instead it just turns out that Marty's just sick of being rejected all the time by various women. Meanwhile, back at Marty's house, he lives with his mother, Teresa, and Teresa is talking with Marty's cousin and Marty's cousin's wife, so Marty's cousin-in-law, I guess. And actually, it's mostly the wife. She's doing all the talking, and she's fed up because she's living with her mother-in-law, who is, of course, Teresa's sister. So Marty's
in a very small apartment.
In a very small apartment.
With your mother-in-law, yeah.
Yes.
And a baby.
Yep. So plans are made that Teresa will go talk with her sister and convince her to move in with Teresa and Marty instead, and this young couple can bring up their baby without the mother-in-law hanging about. Marty also decides he wants to talk to this same cousin about the prospects of buying the butcher business, the one where he works. The boss wants to sell and Marty's keen to buy it. So this is all riveting plot at the moment. Marty is then badgered into going out for the evening. He tries to say, I'm just going to stay in. But his mother says, no, off you go. Off you go to the Stardust Ballroom and you can find a nice girl there. And he clearly hates the entire experience in the ballroom. He's dragged along with his friends. Every time he works up the courage to, ask a girl for a dance, he's rejected and he just slinks back into the corner again. But this is where we meet Clara, who's she's introduced to the plot, and she's on a blind date with some guy who thinks she's not attractive enough for him. He's a kind of a horrible dude, and he sneaks over to Marty once he gets into the club and says, I'll give you $5 if you take Clara off my hands. So you pretend you're an army buddy of mine, and there we go, we'll swap it out, and I'll go hook up with some other girl. And Marty refuses this offer. He says, no, I don't want to do that.
Too honourable for that.
Too honourable. But some other guy's not as honourable as Marty. He takes up the offer. But then he also rejects Clara and kind of wanders off. And then there's debate about whether he needs to be paid.
I think Clara rejects him.
Oh, Clara
says, no,
him.
I don't need to be babysat. And Clara rejects him.
That makes more sense. Yep. I thought he just pocketed the money and then walked away.
Well, he tries to pocket the money. He says, not my fault she rejected me.
Yep. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, Clara heads off. She's upset nevertheless. And Marty follows her outside and he talks to her and they hit it off pretty much immediately. Marty's got pickup lines such as, you're not such a dog as you think you are, which is wins her over.
We're getting a little mirror into why little window into why Marty doesn't go well on his dates.
Yes. Anyway, he's gone well this evening because the two of them spend the evening together. They dance and then they talk and then they walk along and, Marty does most of the talking. He can't seem to shut up. He tells Clara all of his life dreams, his schemes for purchasing the butcher business. He's got war stories to tell and he goes on and on and on. And Clara seems perfectly happy with this. She encourages him. She says, I've only known you 3 hours, but I know you're a good butcher, which seemed... I'm not quite sure how she made that logical deduction, but let's say it's fact.
And if you haven't watched this movie, you're getting a pretty good idea of it. I don't think you have to go away and watch it, but that's pretty much what the script is like.
Yep. So they head back to Marty's place. Marty tries to kiss Clara. She turns away. She kind of is not so keen in that particular moment. Marty gets a bit cross at this, and Clara kind of appeases him. She says, look, I do like you. I just don't know how to handle this situation. So she's inexperienced. Marty's inexperienced. They don't really know what's going on. But here to help is Marty's mother. She pops back into the house and she's just been to see her sister to say, out to move, you're moving in with me. And during that process, the sister complained about how awful it was to be old and, have your children say, nah, you've got to be kicked out of home. And so as soon as Marty's mother realizes that Clara's going to take the daughter-in-law's side in this, she starts telling the story, and Clara says, I can understand why they'd want to get rid of the mother. I think that must be very awkward for the daughter-in-law.
Yeah, foolish thing for Clara to be saying.
Very foolish. So Marty's mother goes, I can see the writing on the wall here. This Clara girl is trouble. So Marty takes Clara home by bus, and he promises that he'll call her the next day. Everyone's very excited. It's been a very successful first date. Clara goes into her home, and she's very excited, and she monologues at her parents, who are both in bed. She goes in and she just starts
It's well
rabbiting
past
on.
1 a.m. and she goes in to tell her parents about it. I mean, honestly.
And she doesn't shut up. Like we thought they might have been ghosts, right? The parents, because
it is one of the worst scenes I've ever seen in any movie.
Yeah, she just talks and talks, so they don't get a word in. Anyway, so that's pretty much the entire setup. Next day, Marty's aunt starts to move in to live with Marty and his mother, but she also fans the flames of Teresa's concerns about Clara again. And she says quotes like, "College graduates are one step from the street," so she's very anti-Clara. And Marty's mother says, "Ryan, you shouldn't see Clara again." And so do all of Marty's friends. Marty hangs out with his friends, and they say, "Nah, she's too plain. She's not good enough." They say, "Stick with us. We'll keep cruising for chicks." And Marty says, "All right, off we go. We'll do that instead." And he forgets to call her, or chooses not to call her, and she sits at home all afternoon, all upset, because in those days you had to wait by the telephone at home for your call. So Marty has been defeated by 70-year-old toxic masculinity, and but eventually, however, he does overcome it, because in the very last minute of the movie, he comes to his senses, says, "I don't care what any of my friends say, don't care what my mother says, I like Clara, and if I keep liking her, then I'll marry her." And off he goes. He dashes to her phone and calls her, and the movie ends, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, we had a Hollywood ending.
We
after
did have
all.
a very happy ending, right?
Yeah. So, what did you think of this movie, Dan?
Well, it was short. It's the shortest best picture winner in the history of the Oscars, just 90 minutes long. So it was short. So that's a big tick.
I would have liked it to have been even shorter. It is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I reckon I would put it down below number 50 on my Hitchcock list. I'd rather watch, what's at the bottom of my list? Frenzy. Suspicion. Yeah. Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Yep, I'd rather watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith. That's saying something.
That's very grim. Yeah, well, I would have liked it if it was 1 minute shorter, perhaps. If it had ended 1 minute earlier, because they do this big zoom in on Marty's face as he realises that, he hasn't called Clara back, and he's kind of trapped with his idiot friends who don't know what they're doing.
And his life hasn't changed.
If they stop the movie there,
that
I'm
would have
like,
been great.
that is it's a dark ending, but it's a great ending. It's just like, you fool, you blew it, and there you go.
Yeah, that's really good.
But the Hollywood ending kind of messed it up. I mean, it wouldn't have made it one of my favourite movies of all time, but it would have bumped it up a couple of notches.
That would have definitely bumped it up a few notches.
Yeah.
It feels like we missed the best bit of this movie because it all happens after the movie ends.
Yes.
This felt very much like it should have been compressed into about 15 minutes, and then we see the next bit of the plot, which is the sister and the mother and living together, and Marty and all the conflict between Marty and Clara, because they're not off to a rosy start, really.
And she's got friends against her.
God, he abuses her. Yeah. Kind of gives her some sexual and verbal abuse on the first date. That's a massive red flag.
Yep.
So it feels like the best bit of this movie happened after the movie was over. That we weren't shown, does Clara regret shacking up with him?
Yep.
Did they kick the sisters out of the home?
Yep.
What happens next?
Yeah, it's teased you with all these possibilities.
Yeah.
So yes.
Which maybe, good movies do that as well.
Yeah. Well, that's all in Marty too.
Yeah.
The Martification.
Yeah.
I did think it mostly did a good job of showing kind of that euphoria when you first meet somebody you have a connection with.
Yeah.
I got carried, like it exaggerated it and made Marty ramble more than I felt was realistic. I made Clara rambling to her parents more than was realistic. But I did kind of evoke that vibe of, oh my God, I'm so excited to have met somebody who I have a connection with. I thought that was like Marty excitedly punching the stop sign and running off into traffic.
Yeah.
Just because he's kind of got this adrenaline flowing. I've felt that way after particularly good dates.
Yeah,
and
that
so
was good.
so I thought that was good.
That's a glimmer of hope there. Mind you, they rammed it down our
They did
throats.
indeed,
If there was
yeah.
something that could be said once, they said it 4 times.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
a few examples of those later.
Yes.
So yeah, and, kind of was heartwarming. They were very plain characters, and I guess that was unusual back then.
Yeah.
Hollywood always, particularly when you couldn't talk, you had to put something pretty on the screen.
Yep.
I'm not sure Hitchcock always did that.
Well, I mean, we will be comparing this to Catch a Thief, and I don't think you get much less plain than Cary Grant and Grace
Yeah.
Kelly, but we'll come back to that.
But also, I mean, it was black and white as well.
Yep.
I think it's really remarkable. There must have been very few other choices that year for all of those best pictures and best actors.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it kind of captured the despair of constant rejection pretty well. Like when Marty made the phone call to the girl he'd met a month ago, that was like, oh God, this is painful. The fact
It
that
was really good. That was a good
He's
scene.
got to talk through this awkward conversation. She doesn't really remember him, and he's
Yes.
got to explain who he was and
Yep.
ask her out. And she's saying, "Oh, I can't do it tonight." And he's like, "What about next week?" And just like, "Oh," God. And we don't hear the other half of the
Yeah.
conversation. We just hear Marty being, very awkward.
Yeah, that was good. The start of it, where Marty was sort of totally in character, he was very convincing, and then he kind of changes character a number of times throughout the movie. Like when he starts monologuing at Clara on the date, that
Yep.
was quite out of character. He wasn't
Yeah.
a talker, and he wouldn't have talked that much. It was just way over the top.
Yes,
And then
yep.
when he tries to kiss her and then yells at her, that was totally out of character. That didn't feel like him at all.
Yeah, I didn't sense that he'd be angry at that. He just
No.
kind of the Marty we saw in the first
Yep.
10 minutes would have just sulked and said, "Fine, nice to have met you."
He would have regretted it. He would have
yeah.
apologised. Like
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that. He would have gone, "Oh, sorry, I didn't read the signs," or all of that would have been different. I felt like they didn't get his character very well after
Yeah.
they'd drawn it really well at the start.
Yep.
And then the other poor bits, the bits where they were patronising the audience at the start, when we already understood he was under marriage pressure, but we were told at least 3 times in the first 10 minutes, over and over. It was like, we got it the first
Yep.
time. We don't need to be told this again.
Yep.
The part where the sister who's just about to move in with the mother says, "Oh, they'll do the same to you, First you'll be told the house is falling apart.
Yep.
Then you'll be told we'll move to a new apartment in the city. And then you'll be told you're not welcome." And then within 2 minutes, Marty comes in, and it wasn't even a different script. He just repeated that
Yeah.
exact. They could have cut and pasted it from
Yeah.
it was just, oh my God. It felt like we were treated as stupid as an audience.
Yeah, as if we
wouldn't notice
We
the first
wouldn't
time.
notice. They very much spelt that out
Yeah.
in far too much detail. And
Way too
in a
much.
different movie, that's kind of a comic beat. Like he says,
it
they'll
wasn't
say
played for
this,
comedy,
and
no.
then he comes in and says it. But
Yep.
this wasn't played for comedy.
No.
It was just a weird repetition.
Bashing us over the head with it,
Yeah,
and it did feel a bit like they think we're dumb here.
Mm.
We did get it the first time when Clara's monologuing at her parents. It was almost like it was going to go into some kind of speculative realm, because nobody listens to their daughter monologuing like that in the middle of the night for over 5 minutes without even saying, "Oh, darling, oh
Yeah.
yes, nice." They weren't nodding. There was
Maybe
nothing
they
going
were
on.
paid by the line or something, and it's just like, all right, we can't have you say a single word.
It's truly one of the worst scenes It's worth watching the movie just for that scene to go, what were they thinking there?
In some versions of the film, that scene was cut out. Like that 5 minutes just disappears.
Oh,
so
I understand why.
there is no Clara excited. I thought Clara being excited was good, but it did go on far too long.
All they needed was mum and dad to say, "Oh,
Yeah.
darling, that's lovely,"
Yeah.
but they don't, and then they start talking after she's left the room. It's the most
it's very
unnatural
weird.
thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't happen in reality.
Yeah, someone's a ghost in that, and maybe Clara, maybe it's the parents.
It's the sort of thing when you're looking at a script, you'd cross that out and go add in some
Yeah,
action.
yeah,
beat
because on
there.
the script it must have just been like a massive wall of text for Clara.
Yeah.
It's like, no, break this wall of text up.
So you may understand that we didn't really love this movie. So why was this Best Picture, Dan?
I'm not sure. I mean, it is a mystery, because like you can understand some people going, "Oh, well, this is a simple little romance. It's kind of heartwarming in theory." But But yeah, it's very difficult to understand what would in 1955, and there must have been something that made it seem remarkable.
Yeah.
Whether it was like a character study that was unusual for the time, or
Ugly actors were just never portrayed.
yeah, whatever it was seems lost for the ages.
Yeah,
But I did do some research, and there is a type of genre which is known as a kitchen sink drama. And this was very popular in the 1950s and 60s, admittedly mostly in the UK.
Right.
And it's about basically working class people, and it's very, like, there's no elaborate plots. It's just their everyday lives, the trials and tribulations and all their experiences. And it's, focusing on them with a slightly, patronizing air, perhaps, just like, oh, look at these poor people.
Yep.
These poor people. Isn't
A bit
it terrible?
voyeuristic.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And maybe that's kind of a holdover that got this some acclaim, but that's the only thing I could find.
It was not a normal way of making a movie,
No.
and I guess anything unconventional tends to attract the love of the Academy. I mean, it was perhaps authentic, that slice of Italian culture that wasn't the mafia for a change.
Yes.
Very ordinary people being portrayed in a romance. Normally, these people would be the supporting people that never got anything.
Yep.
So I suppose, and also it felt to me very much like a TV sitcom that it wasn't very funny.
Yep.
But we didn't have television very much back in 1955, so people weren't used to that style, which then became very popular in the 60s and 70s of showing everyday life in a sitcom.
You could easily see Marty and his mother is, well, there's an Australian sitcom called Mother and Son. It's essentially that.
Yeah.
It's a grown man living with his mother, and so I could easily see that being a sitcom with the wacky aunt who's just moved in, and
But otherwise, I actually think the direction was really poor. The script was terrible. It was an awful screenplay.
Yep.
And if it had been done well, I could have understood it, but I actually don't think it was done very well.
Yeah.
And we don't know much about filmmaking. Anyway, and the other thing I wanted to mention, what was the point of that awful friend? Wasn't his friend awful?
No, his friend. Yeah, there were a few friends, but there was one main friend, Angie, I think his name was.
Yeah.
And he
He felt like he was ad-libbing his way through the movie.
It was very strange. At first, like in the time when I thought, oh, maybe this is about Marty being gay, I thought, oh, maybe he's secretly in love with this guy, and that's like there's going to be some awkwardness about he wants to go out and pick up girls, and Marty's like, oh, I just want to hang out with you. But no, that wasn't it. They veered rapidly off that. He was just because at one point Marty disappears with Clara for the night, and this guy gets all desperate. I mean, maybe he's in love with Marty. Who knows? But
look, I mean, there were six blokes in this circle of unmarried blokes. I mean, at least one of them is gay. Yeah. Not that the film really talked about that.
No. But he's running around. He's desperate. He meets Clara. He's just she's no good.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's very strange. Basically, I mean, nobody wants to. Everyone's saying, Marty, you need to get a wife. Nobody's very happy once he finds a girlfriend. They're all very upset.
That was an interesting development, wasn't it? It's all Marty, get a girlfriend. And then, oh no, not this one.
Yeah. And this is, of course, all despite the fact that the one marriage we did see in the movie was pretty miserable.
That was great. That portrayal of that marriage was really, again, it was over the top and patronising to the audience, but it was very interesting. Tiny little subplot there. Yeah. There was more going on in the plot in the tiny little subplots than there was in the main romance. And I think the other most interesting, apart from that, that marriage being portrayed with the child and the mother, and that was really interesting. The other interesting thing was the subplot about the mother taking in the sister, and them being all sympathetic until she gets told that the same thing could happen to her. Yeah. I mean, that really was quite a good little development there, and good on the two older women in the story for getting that little bit of it. So I think people watching this movie would have sympathised with at least one of the characters, and maybe that's why it was so popular. I'm either Marty, maybe I'm Clara, maybe I'm Marty, maybe I'm the mother. Yep. There's someone in this for me.
Maybe I'm the daughter-in-law who's got to get rid of his mother-in-law. Yeah.
Maybe I'm the friend.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the sleazy guy who tries to pay off the...
Something for everybody. There was also the other thing that I noticed. There's one weird scene. This is when Angie's running around searching for Marty, and he goes back to the diner where they all hang out. Yeah. And we overhear this very strange conversation between a couple of women, and they're talking about another woman who'd been told that she couldn't have any more children because it might kill her, and then she got pregnant and she had another child, and the punchline of this story was, oh, that's great for her. No, it did kill her. She's dead now. And it was just like that was that. So it's played for laughs, I think. But I guess it was also another, strange warning about the perils of marriage in the 1950s, that if you keep having kids, which you've got to do when you're married, there's no birth control at that point.
That's what happens to you. And women get the raw end of the stick. That is, again, something that if it was a movie these days or even a book, you'd be told, just get rid of that irrelevant scene.
It was really random and weird. But
it was completely irrelevant. The other thing did annoy me all the way through, and I did say that Esther Minciotti was a good actor in this, and she was a good actor, but someone had told her she had to put on a really fake Italian accent, and it just was so glaring and awful. The other sister didn't put on such an accent. It was definitely not natural, and it wasn't done in The Wrong Man.
Yeah.
So that was stupid too. I'm blaming the director for this. This director should not have got onto first base when it comes to selection for an Academy Award.
Yes. Well, the film was originally a TV movie, so it came out a couple of years before.
Oh, I thought the TV thing came after. But no, it was first to TV.
It was first. So it was broadcast live on something called the Philco Goodyear Television Playhouse, so good sponsorship there. And then it was presumably a hit on
right, so they thought they'd
live.
make a movie out of it.
Let's make a movie out of that. And so Marty in that version was played by Rod Steiger, and he'd go on to appear in On the Waterfront the next year with a young Marlon Brando. So he had to be replaced. So that's when Ernest Borgnine got the role. But others from the TV version did keep their roles for the film. So Marty's mother and aunt.
Oh, that explains why they were so good in this together.
Yep. We also had, the Nancy Marchand played Clara in the TV version, and she was supposed to take the role in the film, but Betsy Blair read the script, wanted the role. She was very keen, and this is where her husband Gene Kelly came to the rescue. So he helped her lobby for the role.
He had a lot of influence. Yeah, okay.
So he said, all right.
Oh, I wonder if Gene Kelly was voting on the Academy.
Maybe.
This is where just the friends of the people who were in the movie may have had a big impact here.
Anyway. It does make me wonder about, I've often wondered about the casting process for roles where people are explicitly written in the script as physically unattractive or plain. And especially for Gene Kelly to say, oh, my wife would be perfect in this role as a very plain woman. So it's not for the insecure actor, right? To go for those roles.
And I guess, Borgnine was a little bit overweight, so therefore that's, something that wasn't often portrayed as a romantic lead.
Yeah. But it's very, very interesting. And the reverse is also true. I am always impressed by actors who find the bravado to, take on the role of somebody explicitly called out as stunningly beautiful. Just like, oh, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, it's very, very interesting. But the entire movie was shot in just 16 days. So just a couple of weeks.
Very low budget then too, right?
They took a few days for retakes, but no mucking about.
Yeah, interesting.
So what are the best lines of the movie?
There weren't many.
No.
So Marty on the very first, in fact, I think within the first
pretty much that first
5 or 10 minutes, says to Clara, see, dogs like us, we ain't such dogs as we think we are.
So there were lots of dog talk in this movie. Everybody was saying, she's a dog, he's a dog, they're a dog.
It was there was a lot of talk about women being dogs, like way too much for me. It
must have been more commonplace and less brutal. It must have seemed less brutal. It was
also talked about the men in the same way.
Yeah.
So at some point, dogs has been more of just left for women over the history of time, but at that moment, it seems that it was used for men and women. Yeah, it's very dated.
It's very dated. Yeah. And I guess the other quote I quite enjoyed was, this is when later on in the movie, Marty's trying to get some business advice from his cousin, and he says, Tommy, just let me get a couple of minutes, will you? Because I promised Mr. Terry that I would let him know by tomorrow. You and Virginia can fight any time. So he's trying to interrupt his cousin and his wife from having one of their brawls.
I guess the fact that Marty ignored the fighting in that couple, I found that quite ominous and a bit disturbing. It was like, this is natural. This is the way men and women interact, which is really awful. Again, the best bit of the movie happened after the movie. What happened to the business? Yep. Did he get the money? All of that.
Anything could have happened.
Yeah.
On the plus side, the Bechdel test.
Oh, it romps in there.
Cruises it in. Yep. No mucking about there. There's Teresa, her sister, her niece-in-law. They're talking all the time about all kinds of things.
Fantastic. In fact, they're mostly talking about women. It's an easy pass.
Yep. What about modern technology? How might that change or improve or impact the plot?
I think Marty and Clara would probably get more success in the modern day dating online, depending on whether or not they put the best photo of themselves up.
Yep.
That could make a difference.
Yep, they'd be swiping away at their various apps. Yep.
That's right. And, obviously getting a lot of rejection, but they'd find each other eventually.
Yeah, and they'd be rejected more efficiently. You don't have to go out to all these horrible nightclubs and spend hours and hours there to be rejected by, 5 women. You can be rejected by 5 women in 5 minutes.
And you don't have to ring up the ones who've rejected
yes.
you.
Yep. Yes, and of course, speaking of phones, these days you don't have to wait around at home for the phone call like poor old Clara did.
That's right.
Which is better. She might.
You still wait around for the text, don't you? Wait around for the phone.
She would have been constantly staring at the phone, just waiting for the 3 dots to start appearing on her message, but not to be. And the only other thing that I liked, quite enjoyed, was the big concern for Marty's potential butcher business was this talk of a looming threat called the supermarket. He had to have all these plans to counteract. What if this supermarket comes into being? So these days they'd probably have to change that to artificial meat or something.
Well, he'd have to have his own little small business doing cybersecurity or something, wouldn't he?
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, as we mentioned, tributes, homages, remakes. It was a TV movie first, as we mentioned, but it was also a later TV movie version in 1971. And then there was the John Candy movie called Only the Lonely from 1991, and that has a very similar kind of plot. Guy lives with his mother, struggling to find a girl, etc.
So all TV shows and movies to be avoided.
Yes.
If they're similar to this one. But I think we can easily slot this movie into the Oscar movie cinematic universe, can't we?
Yeah, I think so. As I was listening to Marty's mother and aunt talk back and forth in their strong Italian accents, I thought, surely these two are related to The Godfather. They're related to Don Vito Corleone, so they're maybe sisters, maybe cousins at the very worst. But there's definitely a relationship there.
And the absent husbands of the mother and the aunt. I mean, I think we did know how they died, but anyway, obviously victims of some mafia hits. That's definitely the case.
Almost certainly.
They were wearing black.
Yes. So on to the Hitchcock movie checklist. Do we have a MacGuffin for this one?
You need a plot for a MacGuffin. No.
Usually, yes. I don't have a MacGuffin either.
Unless you're wondering, is this a plot-driven story or is it a character-driven worthy story? It falls heavily into the latter camp.
It does indeed.
Not our favourite type of movie either.
No. And there is also no cameo in this one, but Delbert Mann could easily have given himself a cameo. Like first scene, just pop yourself in the back of the butcher shop or something, or in the diner, anywhere.
Oh, that scene where they went to the nightclub, there were like a zillion extras in that one. Yeah,
put himself there. I mean, he could have taken the $5.
That's right.
We do definitely have mother characters, though. We've
very
got
strong
lots
mother
of
characters. Marty's mother. We have the sister mother. We have Virginia. Is Virginia the name of the other mother with a baby on her hip? And
Yeah, lots of mothers. Marty's mother's probably the main mother in there. She's this looming presence in Marty's life.
And she's lovely too. Yeah. I mean, at the very start, she's helping out her niece or nephew. I can't remember which it is. Nephew.
Yeah, nephew and niece-in-law.
Nephew and niece-in-law, and sitting them down and being a very, someone that they can turn to, and she's giving them good advice. So she was really delightful.
And she's saving the day. She's swooping in, getting rid of the mother-in-law out of that apartment.
What a lovely, lovely person. And we did have a bit of a chuckle over the sister saying at one point that she was 55 or something. She looks about 75.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit of chuckle. You young 35-year-olds listening won't get that, but it is very funny when someone that's close to your own age is portrayed as elderly.
Birds and animals, just the butchered ones in this one, right? So just a lot of dead lambs and pigs and stuff. We did have Marty as a character at a standstill, socially anyway. He's going nowhere relationship-wise, pretty much on the brink of giving up on finding any kind of love. So
it would have been much more interesting if he had to go on the run at some point.
Yeah, well, instead his friend was on the run, but running all around town looking for Marty. So Marty was kind of on a run he didn't even know he was on. He just disappeared.
In a series of boring scenes, his friend went looking for him.
What about characters with elements of good or bad?
Well, I think the mother, Marty's mother, is a good example. She's really got everyone's best interests at heart, except when she realises her own interests are now threatened.
Yes.
I think that reality of, this could be me now with the girlfriend coming in. Marty, I don't want you to find a wife after all.
Yeah, that was good. I think that's definitely the best one.
It was really great. It was a very convincing reversal.
We do have an ordinary man who's Marty, who's as ordinary as you can get. And we also have a little bit of a mistaken identity here because Marty is asked to do a bit of mistaken identity work. He said, I'll give you $5. You can pretend to be an old army buddy of mine. And but he doesn't take up the offer. So a mistaken identity foregone.
Such callous. I mean, that really, we both went, oh boy, such a callous treatment of that poor woman, Clara.
Yep.
Any old bloke, we don't know whether this bloke, he's offering anyone $5. The sort of person who will take $5 to look after someone. It's the worst possible.
Yeah.
This poor woman is just this could be a serial killer who's now taken this money and passed off as the army buddy. Awful.
Yep. Not good.
Yeah. Smart young woman.
Smart
That's
young
Clara,
woman.
right?
Yeah, Clara's easily. She's a teacher, but she is also a tragic 29-year-old spinster. There is no hope for poor Clara.
Yep.
But we do have some other tropes, courtesy of TV tropes. So we have the author avatar. So apparently people who knew Chayefsky, the screenwriter, they suspected that Marty was very much like Chayefsky himself. So Chayefsky was also a stocky, socially awkward guy from a blue-collar Bronx background.
Okay.
So this is writing what he knew.
Yeah.
We have Motormouth, which is pretty much Marty from the instant he meets Clara, and then Clara the instant the date is over. She probably had the entire conversation, her half of the conversation for the date saved up, so that's why she went into her parents and just
that is a
spurted it
factor.
out.
He wasn't letting her get a word in. Lots of red flags there, Clara.
Yeah. We do have the old maid, who is poor old 29-year-old Clara, and Marty as well as a 34-year-old, both well past it. No hope for them. And the plain Jane, which is again both Marty and Clara. They're both classified as plain Janes. So how does Marty compare to Catch a Thief?
I mean, To Catch a Thief is so much better on multiple levels. I feel like we should be Hitchcocking up Marty, actually, rather than the reverse. But
we want to get an Oscar for Hitchcock.
We want to get an Oscar for Hitchcock. So how can we do that? Well, to start with, you can't cast Cary Grant and Grace Kelly.
Yeah, this is very foolish from Hitchcock to cast these beautiful people in his movie.
So could we have had Borgnine and Betsy Blair?
Oh, it would have been a different movie. Imagine Ernest Borgnine. Imagine the cat. Imagine Ernest Borgnine being the cat crawling all over rooftops in the night and cutting up steaks and stuff by the day at the local butcher.
Would we have had to have the crawling over the rooftops? Because it feels like, you've got to ditch the plot altogether.
That's true, yeah.
Remove the thief. There's no thief.
Yeah.
I mean, you just call it To Catch, and then no thief, no
To
nothing.
Catch a Butcher.
To Catch a Butcher, maybe? You just have the two of them meeting it can't be as glamorous as a nightclub. They just meet in a pub. I mean, it's basically exactly the same story.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Anyway, so we've also got to have them, the Cary Grant and Grace Kelly role. They've got to be, far less socially confident. They've got to be much, much more socially awkward. So, lose a lot of money as well. Everybody in To Catch a Thief is far too rich.
Yeah, they all have to be just at the local. Maybe they could be at the local pokies or whatever the basic gambling is in a local pub, rather than at the casinos of Monaco or wherever they are.
Yeah, I think we just have to strip everything that's enjoyable off To Catch a Thief, and then
no French scenery.
Then we're with a chance.
No beautiful cars. They go for a bit of a drive, but it's a really ugly car.
Yeah, a car that barely goes. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So I don't think there's any way to give To Catch a Thief Marty buzz without completely destroying To Catch a Thief. So we may just try next time to get an Oscar for Hitchcock.
And Hitchcock is not capable of making such a boring movie. Even the early, black and white, silent movies were not that boring.
No, definitely not. All right, so I'm suspecting you're going to rank this the bottom of the 7 movies we've watched.
Number 7 for me.
Below Around the World in 80 Days.
Oh, absolutely. It's Daylight and then Marty.
I wasn't quite as harsh. I've got this right in the middle.
Right.
I've got this after Wings. Wings is miles over it, but it gets a point for being so short. Like 90 minutes, I can live through this much easier than Around the World in 80 Days.
That was a long movie.
It was eternal.
Yeah.
So I'm putting it in the middle ahead of You Can't Take It With You, Around the World in 80 Days, and the god-awful Lost Weekend. So,
Some of these movies...
None of them are good. Well, the very few... Yeah, I guess the top three I all enjoyed. Marty downwards I didn't enjoy so much. But
I was fully prepared to really love these Oscar winners. If they managed to beat Hitchcock, I thought, yep, they must be good. But the answer is no.
No,
The majority of them are not. They don't hold up well.
All right, so let's get back to some Hitchcock then. The next movie will be the 13th best Hitchcock movie as voted on by our listeners. So what movie will that be?
So the cryptic clue was 7 letters. Is it wrong to care about a shorter version of this film? And the answer is Rebecca. It's a very tricky and breaks a few rules in the cryptic clue department. But wrong is, of course, an anagram indicator. Mm-hmm. Wrong is pointing towards the word care. So the word care is an anagram, and you've got to put those letters around Beck. Beck is a shorter version of the answer, which is Rebecca.
Yeah.
So we have two...
So this is an Inception-style cryptic crossword clue.
Yeah, it is. You've
got to know the answer before you could solve the clue.
Yep.
So that's challenging, but yeah.
Exactly. Take all those letters, Care and Beck, and you end up with Rebecca. And we are rewatching Rebecca. You originally ranked this 19th, and I ranked it 22nd.
Yeah, so it would have made my top 20 just outside yours.
Well, it depends. I may have reassembled some of my top 20, but it's very close to the top 20. And in fact, our listeners thought it was number 13. Will we bump it up higher on our rewatch? Who knows?
Well, we will let you know next month. So yeah, as always, if you have any questions or feedback on Rebecca, you can feel free to email them to feedback@hitchpodonline.com, and we will answer those questions in the next episode. And we will be continuing the book club. So Rebecca is based on a 1938 novel by Daphne du Maurier. And we'll be doing a little book club on that one with our patrons. So if you want to be involved with that, you can become a patron. Patreon.com/HitchPod.
I'm really looking forward to this book. It's a wonderful, wonderful book and a few differences to the movie. So it's going to be really great to read this one.
Yep. So we'll be reading that. We're just about finished up with To Catch a Thief. So I've been mostly reading To Catch a Thief. I haven't quite got to the end of it, but I've put some thoughts down as I've been reading it.
Yeah.
So that's also available on our Patreon, which is also where you can find our most recent episode for our Patreon listeners, which was the movie Apollo 13. We did a recap of that one.
That was very fun too.
So you can tune into that. That's in there. The whole heap of other stuff in our Patreon feed for people for just a couple of bucks a month. So sign up to that, patreon.com/HitchPod, and we will see you next month.
Thank you for listening to HitchPod. Please come and talk to us on Twitter at HitchPodTweets or on Facebook by searching for HitchPod. And you can also email us directly at feedback@hitchpodonline.com. And if you want more Hitchcock content, please consider becoming a HitchPod supporter. Just go to patreon.com/HitchPod. And for as little as $2 a month, you can get access to our Season 1 coverage of every single Hitchcock movie, as well as bonus episodes on Hitchcock-esque movies. Invitations also to watch live rewatches and much, much more.